And you can always hear this long, sad story. You know it takes time. For 300 years, we've given them time. And I've been tired so long, now I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. And we want to change. We want to change in this society in America. Because, you see, we can no longer ignore the fact and getting our children to sing, "Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail?" What do we have to hail here? The truth is the only thing gonna free us.
That was civil rights leader and activist Fannie Lou Hamer in her 1964 speech asking the government to protect the black citizens in Mississippi against violence and police abuse. And she also raises the question of how long must black Americans wait for help. We're on Facebook and Twitter with our post show continuing our discussion on black anger. Michael, I'd like you to respond to Kim's point about anger being the opposite of despair and how important it is that we recognize that.
That's no question. I mean, it's such a good point, Kim, because let's imagine the alternative, right? Not just from an individual sense, but in a political sense. If we lose our hold on this moment, on the anger we feel in this moment, what is the fate of this country? Is there any future for democracy and a decent, dignified life, not only for black folk, but for any inhabitant of this country, if we lose the urgency now? So it's a matter of survival, not only at the personal level, but the survival of the kind of unfulfilled promise of American democracy, right? I mean, if we're going to maintain any hope that American democracy can be what it claims it aspires to, we need to maintain the anger and transform it into targeted and sustained political activism and engagement, not only during this election, but afterward. We're in a moment of crisis, and if we're not angry, we're doomed.
Philip, pick up on that.
Wow, I couldn't have said it better. You think about it. Think about what happens when you are engaged in a movement. Black Lives Matter, for weeks on the streets, trying to make changes, and nothing happens. You, of course, descend, you go in one direction or another. Oftentimes it is despair. Despair becomes apathy. Apathy becomes hopelessness. And I think what we're seeing, however, is something very different than that. We're seeing a sustained movement, where folks realize they're in it for the long haul, a reminder in many ways of the objectives that many felt during the civil rights movement, knowing that it could not just happen tomorrow. In South Africa, in apartheid South Africa, it was clear that this was a long movement. Nelson Mandela called it the Long March. His jailing in the early 60s to his emancipation in 1990, though that could not have happened without a sustained movement. And that movement was sustained in large part by, as Kim and Renee and Michael have said, a sustained anger. It was a sustained anger. That was what kept the movement going, so on and so forth. And I think that we are seeing that now. I do wonder, of course, what happens after November 3rd, when in fact we've seen how voter suppression has been so effective. Will it be effective, so effective that it basically robs people of their votes, so on and so forth? What happens then? What do we do with that anger? I think that anger, again, could best be manifest in a movement, a sustained movement. That is, I think, how people are thinking about it now. That is not just a question of relying on a political candidate for hope. It's a question of relying on ourselves, on people in the streets, grassroots movements, journalism in order to make these changes that are absolutely necessary in order for us to call this and to continue to call our country a democracy. A very flawed democracy, obviously, with the deaths of so many Black people on the streets, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd and many others. But I think there's a realization that this anger has to be basically sustained, and it has to be funneled the right way in order to keep anger from devolving into despair.
Renee, please comment on the anger and despair question.
You know, I've heard it said that depression is anger turned inward. So where would that leave you? You have to do something with the anger. You have to do something with the pain. Anger is like pain. It's an alert system to let you know that something is horribly wrong. So you have to respond to that. And I think, you know, when Philip was talking about what happens after Election Day, there's a template for what people are going to do. There's a template. People know that sitting in their houses is not going to do it. The anger that people felt in May, which frankly Black people have been feeling for centuries, but the anger that sort of bubbled over in May hasn't dissipated. Perhaps the media has looked away, but there are still protests going on. There are still demands being made. I think that's the important thing to remember about this moment, you know, because everyone is turned away because, let's face it, when the protests were very diverse and that got a lot of attention, the fact that there are parts of this country that no longer see this as an issue for them doesn't mean that there aren't other parts of the country that are still very much engaged in making these changes and crushing, at last, white supremacy and systemic racism. I don't think that's going to go away. And I think that is what's going to continue to sustain people. You have to do something. There's literally just too much. We're not just talking about what happened to George Floyd or Ahmaud Arbery or Breonna Taylor or Jacob Blake. We're talking about everything that has gone on this year, the ways that everything that happens in this country disproportionately affects Black people and brown people, whether you're talking about the effects of the economy, the pandemic, or the protests we're seeing in the street. It has to go somewhere. I think if it doesn't, again, like I said, I think it is debilitating. I think it will affect our life expectancy. I think it will make us sick. I think there are reasons why my father had a heart attack at 57 and my mother had a stroke at 61. I don't think those are accidents. I think there has to be a way to get that anger out, but use it, as Kim has said, precisely towards defined action.
So I think a lot of folks may look at this group and say, well, you can talk about it and you're obviously very smart, but it really doesn't happen to you, to the extent that it may happen to others. So I want each of you to answer, when was the last time you were an angry Black man or an angry Black woman? And in that moment, how did you feel about it? I'll start with you, Kim, because I see that you have an expression on your face already.
Because it was yesterday, that's right. When I learned that a police officer in my town accosted a young Black man and a young Hispanic man. No, kids. Let me rephrase that, because they're under 18. Accosted two children out of anger about their support, probably vocal support of Black Lives Matter. Now, the idea that a person who is state sanctioned to carry a gun and to use it cannot control her temper enough to not accost two children made me furious because it's wrong. So it made me furious on a moral level, an ethical level, and yes, it made me furious out of fear on a personal level because I have Black children in this town, and this person could come into contact with them. And this is what we deal with daily. So I expressed that anger to the police chief, and I did not censor myself. And I just want to say on another note very quickly that I think we have to also keep in mind that as Philip's talking about what sustains movements, it is anger, and at the same time it's love. And I think we have to really be clear that these young people are acting not only out of anger and frustration, but they're also acting out of a self-love for Black people and for themselves that is powerful. And as long as we keep combining those, we will be okay.
Philip?
But it was yesterday.
Okay. Philip, when was the last time you were an angry Black man?
About 2 seconds ago.
Okay.
It's every day, very honestly. And again, it's a question, again, what you do with one's anger. I think anger can write a script. It can create poetry. I write poetry. I write scripts. I work in journalism, as you know. But it's hard not to be angry when you pick up a newspaper or go on social media and you're reading about, again, voter suppression and how it manifests. But specifically, I was thinking about folks I know who have passed from COVID-19, who have passed from the coronavirus, and
Take time. Take your time, Philip. Finish.
I just know some of these people could, some of their lives could have been saved if we had acted as this country had acted, as if the president had acted, if many in positions of power had acted, knowing that this was a reality and knowing that folks were dying. And that is something for us to be angry about. It makes me angry. So.
Thank you for that. Renee?
I feel like Kim and Philip. I feel like I'm angry all the time, and I don't think of myself by nature as an angry person. I'm certainly not a person who yells, and there's not a day that goes by I'm not screaming at the television of something I see. It's not, the rage I feel when I'm out for a walk and I see people walking around without masks, knowing everything that's been inflicted on this country and everything that the fact that we're still in this place 7 months later, cases are going up, people are dying. We've already passed 212,000 deaths. And the fact that it always felt to me that people really decided this wasn't an issue anymore when the stories started coming out about the pandemic disproportionately affecting Black and brown people. That was the I don't need to care about this moment. And the rage I feel when they show all of the people who are dying, and so many of them are Black and brown people, that their lives were taken unnecessarily, that this was preventable, and people still don't seem to give a damn about that. It turns me inside out. It really does.
Michael, as we're talking about people expressing anger creatively, there was an ad that was going around saying, "I am not your stereotype," earlier this week. I don't know if you're familiar with it. And I don't know if you want to respond to that as you also respond to being an angry Black man. This was a photograph. Well, a photographer did 56 Black men and just showed their faces and said, we're not your stereotype. We are folks here, Black Americans, trying to uphold this democracy, live our lives, and fight against this systemic racism. Anyway, I wanted to put that in before you spoke. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll take that one first, and then the question about when I was angry. I mean, I think we shouldn't underestimate the importance of representations like this, but at the same time understand that even though I think there is kind of a renaissance in Black cultural production and the visual representation of Black diversity going on right now, those kind of symbolic measures are not going to be enough, right, to beat back the institutional oppression and violence that we face on a day-to-day basis. And with respect to the last time I felt anger, it actually connects quite well with what we've just heard from our colleagues here. I was extremely angry about the vice presidential debate. First, given what we know about the health and safety measures that should have been taken, I was furious that they essentially asked Kamala Harris to risk her health and shared the stage in the way that she had to with the vice president. And then, of course, as the debate went on, I was angered by the repeated interruptions and disrespect that she faced from the vice president, which really was not controlled at all by the moderator. So that was just a flashpoint, I think, that illustrates some of the intersections where the public demands this Black woman put herself at risk, at literal risk of illness, by stepping on stage in the first place, and then places such strict guidelines around the way she can express herself, the sort of anger she's allowed to display, is an impossible situation that she found herself in, and she should be lauded for her performance, but it remains just tragic on so many levels and dangerous on so many levels, and infuriating that it's come to this.
Well, I thank you all for a great conversation and your insights, and thank you for joining me, and please stay safe.
Thank you, Calvin.